Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Joining me today is General Ravi Shankar as we take a look at how Trump could change the course of the Ukraine-Russia war. Let's welcome General Ravi Shankar. Ravi Shankar ji, Namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel. How are you, sir?
Namaskar and thanks a lot once again. 1 week later, we're getting together and talk
Yes,
of an
sir.
interesting subject: how Trump can change the course of the Ukraine war.
My apologies, sir. I was held up with something else and I didn't realize the time was
No,
running. So,
no, it's okay. No issues.
General Ravi Shankar, a lot of things are happening that is not saying the media. For example, Trump has actually sent a few emissaries to talk with Putin. It is believed that Putin's withdrawal from Syria was also part of something that was already agreed to, and we don't know what the remaining is. That's a quid pro quo. For leaving Syria, what is Putin going to get? There's a lot of questions about that. Perhaps you have a better idea about the ground situation. You're talking about mining the areas that one country might leave for the other person to go figure it out and get a few limbs blown off. Sorry to be so crude, but talk to us a little bit about how you see this thing play out.
Yeah, first class. First and foremost, let's be very clear about Syria. I don't think Trump has given Putin a deal, or there's a pro quid quo of Putin will not do anything in Syria. In fact, the fact on the ground is uh, Russia is struggling to maintain its bases at Tartus and Kemim. So it's still not on whether that base will continue or not. They're also looking at an alternate base at Tobruk, and if that base has to continue, I think Trump has to intervene, or US has to intervene. Will that happen or not? We'll go through in this whole thing. We'll start with Ukraine because Ukraine is where it is. 3 years plus. That that entire war is going nowhere. I mean, let's look at the state of the war first. Both are in a position where they can't do anything next. That's the point. Uh, Supporters of one will say, "Oh, we are winning always," but what are they winning? They're winning nothing. Russia has reached the line. It can't stretch beyond, because if it stretches beyond, it will get overstretched, and it doesn't have the capability. Though it has better equipment, better artillery, better resources, and all that, but it it can't stretch more. It's short of manpower, and that's very clear. That's why they've got the North Korean troops also. And at some point of time, it will start hitting the economy. If this war goes into 2025, so far the Russian economy is feeding off this war and going up. At some point, it will start reversing, and that point people estimate will be mid 2025. So it's in Putin's interest that this war ends before that. Okay. Now let's look at the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are finding it hard put to maintain the lines, uh, right? And they are not able to maintain the front line. They are dependent on USA for everything. USA, Europe, whatever. They're running short of manpower. They are in a very bad shape. Uh, at this point of time, they both Ukraine and Russia are in a state where someone has to uh, help them finish this war and come to some conclusion. Okay. Uh, the other thing which I didn't mention is, so let's say hypothetically, if Ukraine lines break and Russians advance into Ukraine, it doesn't mean Russian victory, because from there the hybrid war will start, and that will kill Russia. So they might lose. That's why Russia is not stepping out. They've consolidated what they have, and they're not able to move forward. And we also need to remember that Ukraine has bit a small piece of Kursk, very little, but it has got some bargaining power. Okay, so they have to come to a, they have to get an off ramp, exit, and that's where Mr. Trump comes. So Mr. Trump, he said, "Look, the day I become the president, within one day I'll finish this war." Is it feasible? Well, Trump is not God, right? You don't just say like that and this war is going to finish in one day. It's going to take time. What's happened over the past 3 years can't unhappen immediately. So, how can it come to a conclusion? Or what are the options for a conclusion? That's the main thing. So, we have to see what the objectives of the war are. You from Ukraine and from Russia. Let's look at the Ukrainian objectives. Right from the beginning, they wanted to be not part of Russia. They wanted to join EU. They wanted to join NATO and be completely independent. They wanted to retake Luhansk and Donetsk, which was under occupation. I wouldn't say occupation, but they had lost control of Luhansk and Donetsk. They were Russian-backed rebels, Russian-speaking rebels, fighting there from 2014. The territory from 2014 to now, about 10 years, was anyway not with them. But they wanted to retake it back. So that's the stated position of Ukraine. What about Russia? Russia is very clear. NATO shouldn't come into Ukraine and no weapons can be deployed in Ukraine. It should be a demilitarized zone, right? And well, these are the two main things. And yeah, Nazis shouldn't be there, and they want to have a friendly regime, which was undone during that Maidan revolution. Okay, and Luhansk and Donetsk,
Donetsk.
yeah, Donetsk and Luhansk. People there should have the right to choose whom they want to. But later he changed his stance and he amalgamated them as part of Russia. So that's his stance. So whoever has to mediate has to come to this somewhere there. These are the initial objectives. In fact, within the first 3-4 months of the war, they almost came to some talk because there were some talks in Istanbul, mediation through Turkey and all that. But Boris Johnson went there and torpedoed that in Kiev. So that was the end of that story. So you have to pick up threads from there. Okay. So let's say what are the options available? With Trump. After all, Trump has to mediate or give options or something like that to ensure that this comes to an end. Trump can't say tomorrow I am, quitting giving Ukraine any aid. Well, he can do that. He's already given some indication. I'll not give any aid to Ukraine, nothing. Ukraine will collapse. The moment Ukraine collapses, whether Russia moves ahead or not is a different story. Russia has won the war. The moment Russia has won the war, Russia and China will go to town and paint the globe red. Okay, and USA will look like a fool. Is that acceptable to USA? Is that acceptable to the EU? Then the complete NATO alignment will go, and the preeminent position of USA as a global hegemon and everything, all that will go for a toss. And if that happens, I don't think that's what Trump wants, and Trump has never been for that. And he can make great, if that is his concept of making America great again, by giving away Ukraine, that's the end. Okay. Tomorrow you will find China coming and sitting in Ukraine and reconstructing it, and he can keep making America great again wherever he is. So that's one option. Okay. The second option is to reach some kind of an agreement. Whatever that agreement. The problem with any agreement, ceasefire and all that, or rather have a ceasefire and then an agreement. The ceasefire option will cool the war down, right? But it doesn't end the war. And the agreement can be breached any day, like Taliban did it. Taliban used to have agreements and keep breaching it every second day. So that's the second option which can come about. So that ceasefire agreement, that's the second option which Trump has. The third option which Trump has is, he has to give a sop to both Ukraine and Russia. What's the sop to Russia? Like I said, anyway, the area of Luhansk and Donetsk, they have not been with Ukraine for the past 14 years, about 10 years, sorry, from 2014 onwards. And one of the, requirements of Putin was that, look, self-determination and all that. So start that. And of course, there's also this business of Crimea. Crimea, Russia will never give back, right? So say, okay, let's be where it is on ground, and we'll agree to this part of the territorial thing and leave all this to Putin. But if all this is given away free to Putin, it will constitute a victory for him. So what's the balance? The balance is for Zelensky and Ukraine. What is to be given to them? So they have to be given some sort for reconstruction. They have to be given some protection. You see, if any agreement is reached where Ukraine Russia has given some territorial leeway and left, and Ukraine is not given protection, if not now, after 2-3 years, Russia will again invade Ukraine. It will be once they recover. So that's not a good option. So the option is one of the options. I'm listing out all the options. So one of the options is to tell Ukraine that you will be under NATO protection. You might. In this, there are two options. One is admit him into NATO. After all, Finland was also admitted later into NATO. Sweden also was admitted later into NATO. So admit him into NATO, and that's a precondition. This chap goes under NATO, Ukraine goes under NATO, Russia gets Luhansk and Donetsk, and be happy. And then ceasefire and all those things. Oh, will Putin agree to this? Okay, if you can't be under NATO, then NATO protection. And then have a demilitarized zone. In all cases, you need to have a demilitarized zone with either peacekeepers from Europe or from somewhere else, UN mandated peacekeepers. But Europe has to be taken into account. EU has to be taken into account. If Trump doesn't take EU, then there's a problem. Okay. There's a fifth option, right? There's a fifth option. You say, stop the war, freeze everything where it is. And as, you might not give him admittance into NATO, Ukraine and Zelensky. And the fifth option is that, look, you want to continue your base in Syria, come to this. Otherwise, that base goes. And that base is very important for Russia because that base is the hub for all Russian operations in Africa and Middle East. So loss of those two bases, Kemem and Tartus, will be very important. And that is a viable option which might play out. I'm not this thing. You might see in days to come, this will never come out, but it will be there. That they'll be allowed to stay and in return cool the Ukraine war down. Now, why am I saying this? At this point of time, Russia doesn't have the capability to defend that base. Russia stood behind Assad and his forces because Hezbollah fighters were on ground and Russian air power was in the air. Now that element, those Hezbollah is not there. So there's no defense on ground. And Russia doesn't have the capability to defend both its bases. In fact, it doesn't have the capability to defend even one of its bases. Okay, this is not like Bagram airfield where it was a fort of its own kind, and you could defend it in the middle of Taliban thing. This is not DNB few that you could in Vietnam. Those of you who don't know about DNB few, it was in the last century. It was a French garrison in Vietnam, North Vietnam, which was ultimately reduced by Vietnamese after a huge battle. And Battle of Dien Bien Phu is a classic. So it does not Dien Bien Phu, that kind of a story. So Russia has got a problem there. So if Russia has spared that problem, say, okay, you continue with that base, we'll facilitate your use of that base, which might come about, mind you. In which case, get an off-ramp in Ukraine with certain elements of NATO in Ukraine to assist Zelensky, and then negotiate for that Luhansk and Donetsk. Now you negotiate and get the negotiate going. So the war ends, negotiations continue, and there's leverages are there. All these 5 options, any of these 5 options are feasible. The way I look at it, it depends on which side of the bed Trump gets on that particular day when he has to, undertake this. No one knows. Okay. So I thought, first, let me say, will he do all this? And as part of Make America Great Again, there's a question by someone, why will he get involved with all this? He's got enough on his hands. He said, I'll build a wall, I'll do government efficiency, I'll do government inefficiency. A lot of things he's already said I'll do. Okay, he's like, Wizard of the Oz. He's going to come and do this and America becomes great again. It's not going to happen. We all know, deep set bureaucracies are not going to give a fight back. So far, it's one free run for all the Trump picks to say what they want. The sensible amongst them have not spoken at all. And they're the ones who will probably get the best results. But those others, new people are talking what they want. So if Trump is involved internally, will he have time for Ukraine? Okay. So that's the next question which begs an answer. So the thing that, look, one fine day Trump will get up and stop the Ukraine war, we should put out of the equation. If one of the options in some manner he will, handle and take the whole thing forward in a logical manner. Already he's, I think, appointed an envoy, special envoy for Ukraine.
Yes.
Yeah. And more importantly, he's also building up. He went to France recently. And there, I think he's met Macron, he's met others. He's making ground as to how to finish that war. He must have given some message through Macron, because Macron has the equation with Putin and he meets Putin. Then he's already, I think, signaled to Xi Jinping that, look, I need your help to finish this war. So some pressure from China. And he feels his tariffs will give him leverage to, prevent China from helping Russia, because China is in a bad shape economically. Possible. All these is what he's doing. When you say, can he end the war? Well, let me look at the positive side. Probably he's the only person at this point of time who is capable of doing it. Others are not even talking of it. At least he's had the guts to talk of it. We are saying all problems which he's going to face, but I admire him for the guts he's displayed to say, I'll end the war. But these are the problems which will be there. So he's approaching through things. At some point of time, though it's not come out, he might ask our Prime Minister also to help. Because ultimately, for mediation between the two, there has to be a level of trust for both. Who will mediate? For Zelensky, China won't be agreeable. For Putin, anyone from EU will not be agreeable. Turkey will never be agreeable after what has happened in Syria, right? So where does it leave? It leaves India, where both are okay. Zelensky is also okay. So we might have a role. I mean, I'm not too sure about it, but it might this thing. But there's another issue is the fallout of just neglecting the whole thing and withdrawing support from Ukraine. Then the geopolitics of USA, Ukraine, Russia, EU, China, all these get affected. It'll become toxic. I don't think Mr. Trump is a fool that he'll just go hands off from Ukraine one fine morning. It doesn't happen that way. People might call him a maverick and all, but I think he's quite balanced. He's very clear as to what he is doing. He's known to make deals, so he's looking for a deal. So in a deal, both have to be happy. That's the deal, isn't it? It can't be a one-sided deal. And by now, we should know that America it doesn't have the clout to enforce a deal. It can sell a deal. It can't enforce a deal. And that's not there. And in any case, the economies of Russia and Ukraine don't have the stamina to go through. So that's the opportunity, right? There's a battle fatigue out there. That's the opportunity, which I think Trump has seen, and he'll, pounce on. So I've spoken for some time now. I've put across what Trump can do. We'll take your views, your questions, and then we'll move ahead. Yeah, please.
Now, General Ravi Shankar, let's pick up from where we left it as far as Ukraine-Russia war is concerned. We were talking at that point of time about, from this point forward, making forward progress for either country is difficult because they have mined them, both sides. What Russia feels is theirs. They are not going to allow Ukraine to come in, and they have done it, and there are vice versa also. We also talked about some sophisticated things where there's a timed mine or something like that. After 6 months, it will become inactive. Yeah, something like that. Now, given all these things, what is the reason for US now to stop this war? I mean, why I say that is US has huge challenges right now in its own finance. Forget about all these things. There is a big, there's a Tamil saying, Muru Pushnika Sotla Marakar. That means you take a huge pumpkin and you try to hide it inside the rice. You can't. It's there. And this could, in fact, completely take the focus away from everything else as far as Trump is concerned. My 2 cents, sir. Because a lot of things are waiting on the sides, reset of rates and things of that nature. What if something like that happens?
Look, it's like this. Let me put it this way. Ukraine war continuing is bleeding America at some level. If Ukraine has to continue this war, the funding has to come from USA.
Right.
Right. So what you're saying, he has to set his internal finances right. To set his internal finances, he has to wind down the Ukraine war. It's a fiscal requirement. It's not only a peace and things like that. It's a financial requirement to get an off-ramp from Ukraine. And that is important. And getting finishing the Ukraine war is important for other reasons for USA. Why is it important? First is you put peace out there. The moment there's peace out there, you get EU on your side. See, like I said, just because there's an agreement or some kind of a peace or ceasefire, it doesn't mean the war ends or the animosity ends or Ukraine and Russia will again become, balle with each other. That won't happen. That's gone. I think that's gone past. But the same problems with EU, isn't it? So EU has to also recover. So it gives EU a chance to recover. If EU recovers, it's US. And the fact is that, despite all this, EU with Trump coming will take the defense expenditure up, which will contribute to his, kitty. to American kitty, because as per NATO standards, they have to buy weapons from one source, and that source is US. So, so to that extent, this whole story going the way Trump wants is important from a economic point of view first, Then of course the issue of peace. The third thing is, why is USA spending its effort, against Ukraine and Russia in that area? I wouldn't say against Ukraine, against Russia. Their main focus is China. Marco Rubio is, more focused on China. So you have to focus there, and you have to understand what's happening in the South Pacific. Just last week, 9th to 11th, 9th, 10th, 11th, China carried out a blockade drill. They didn't fire, but that blockade drill had the maximum number of aircraft and ships so far in the past 30 years. And this was not announced, unlike in the previous times. Previous 3 times they announced all that. This time they didn't do that also. They just came, did the drill and went back. And that could have easily led into a blockade. If a blockade happens in Taiwan, what's your response? Okay. To offset that, it's not as if USA didn't know that. To offset that, USA has moved a carrier into Japan, a nuclear carrier, a nuclear submarine to Guam, Virginia. Then they have deployed certain weapons. On the first island chain, they've deployed cruise missiles on Tomahawk cruise missiles at Luzon, Philippines. All that is happening. So the focus, I see USA itself is shifting to typical Asia Pacific or the Western Pacific, as if I say. So if that has to be sustained, and if China has to be contained, right, there has to be off ramp. At least with what's happened in Syria, they've got an off ramp here. There'll be problems, but it'll be within Syria or those chaps. It's not that as if Israel is one of the great victors of this war. And Syria will go into 4 control zones as it is. Something like old Germany. And people will keep playing internally and everyone will be happy. At least it gets the tensions off. It doesn't tax USA. And it's already felt, because today there are 3 carriers in that zone around China. I mean, 3 carriers deployment out of 10 is a big number. So it will give them a chance to go there. So getting off Ukraine is very, very important for, I think, USA. And at some level, Trump has to realize it. And of course, the moment you do that, and you reintegrate US, Russia with the European,
economies.
Economies. Then you break that link to China. You see, you break that link to China. Whether the friendship is broken or not is a secondary issue. But that link, fundamental thing, Russia will get a way out. Then once that happens, automatically there will be a degradation in the Russia-China relationship. So Ukraine has a tremendous value. Finishing Ukraine war has tremendous value for USA. I mean, they have 2 choices. Either defeat Russia completely through Ukraine, or get involved with the war. Getting involved with the war is no option with their own finances where it is. Continue with this, it's like a bleeding sore. There's no end game in it. Or do the end game by splitting them and focusing on China. And that's what John Mearsheimer keeps saying. Your problem is China. Why are you going to Ukraine? Russia is not your problem. Russia was a fixation of the Biden government. I mean, that's my view. And I agree with many people like Jeffrey Sachs and John Mearsheimer who have said, look, you could have handled Russia better. So going, putting the icing on Ukraine is important. Yeah, I hope I've answered this question. It's a little long, but it demands that.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You have, sir. Now let's take a few questions.